Good evening. My name is Tanya Bowers, and I would like to call the City of Pasco Planning Commission meeting to order. I would like to welcome all those in attendance this evening and ask you to join me in reciting the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
To begin tonight's meeting, I would like to ask the clerk to call the roll.
Tanya Bowers,
Present.
Joseph Campos. Are they unmuted?
I'm present.
Paul Mendez. I already know he's absent. Abel Campos.
Present.
Isaac Myron.
Commissioner Myram is present.
Okay. Pam Ranciere.
Present.
Jerry Cochran.
Present.
Madam Chair, there are 6 members present and we do have a quorum.
The Planning Commission is an advisory board made up of volunteers appointed by the City Council. The purpose of the Planning Commission is to provide recommendations to City Council regarding changes to the city's comprehensive plan, land use updates, block grant allocations, and zoning code. The Planning Commission is tasked with considering the long-term growth and development of the community, the impact of land use decisions on community, livability, economic opportunity, housing affordability, public services, and the environment. I would like to remind the audience tonight's proceedings are being broadcast live on the City of Pasco's Facebook page and on Charter Cable PSC channel 191, and will be rebroadcast several times during the next month. This meeting is also being recorded so you can watch it on the City of Pasco's website, which is pasco-wa.gov. Click on the video on demand link and make your selection there. There are copies of the meeting agenda available on the back table, so you may follow along with the meeting. At this time, I would like to ask that you silence your cell phones to prevent interruptions during our meeting. For those present this evening, when you are given the opportunity to address the commission, please, well, you can't come to the podium. You will be called upon. Raise your hand and you will be called upon. And state your city of address for our records. Before we begin tonight's meeting, I need to remind the audience and the Planning Commission that Washington state law requires public meetings like the one being held this evening not only be fair but also appear to be fair. In addition, Washington state law prohibits Planning Commission members from participating in discussions or decisions in which the member may have a direct interest or may be either benefited or harmed by the Planning Commission's decision. An objection to any Planning Commission member hearing any matter on tonight's agenda needs to be aired at this time or it will be waived. First, are there any Planning Commission members who have a declaration at this time regarding any item on the agenda? I'm looking over at Mr. White, who is shaking his head. Let the record show that there were no declarations. Second, is anyone in the audience this evening who would object to any Planning Commission member hearing any of the items on the agenda? Once again, Mr. White tells us that there aren't. So let the record show that there were no declarations. We, as a Planning Commission, need and value your input. It helps us to understand the issues more clearly and to make better recommendations to City Council. Furthermore, in many cases, your input here at this Planning Commission meeting is your only opportunity to get your facts and opinions placed into the official record of the City Council, which they will use to make its decision. I encourage you to take full advantage of this opportunity. The next item is the approval of the meeting minutes from the July 16th meeting. These minutes were mailed out to the commissioners ahead of time. I trust you had an opportunity to take a look at them. I would entertain a motion to approve the meeting minutes.
Madam Chair, this is Commissioner Cochran. I move that the meeting minutes from July 16th, 2020 be approved.
Do we have anyone?
Commissioner Myram, I'll second.
Thank you. It has been moved by Commissioner Cochran and seconded by Commissioner Myram. All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? So let the record show that the meeting minutes were unanimously approved. All right. Next on the agenda is the public hearings. So we have a series of public hearings. The first item is a comprehensive plan amendment regarding urban growth area expansion, MF number CPA 2020-001. And we will start our discussion with comments from city staff.
Hello and greetings, members of the Planning Commission. The purpose of this item is to revise the motion made at the June 18th, 2020 Planning Commission meeting regarding the expansion of the city's urban growth area. As you're aware, the current urban growth area is not sufficient to accommodate the forecasted growth we are anticipating in the city of Pasco. While the motion from the June meeting is still applies and correct, staff is proposing to revise the motion to include a specific reference to the urban growth area alternative, in this case attached as exhibit number 1 of the staff report. Staff has identified throughout this process to delineate the urban growth area that is compliant with the Washington State Growth Management Act, specifically RCW 3670A. Since our meeting in June, staff has modified the boundary of the proposed urban growth area by decreasing the overall lands by approximately 100 acres. The modifications were made after considerations from the comprehensive plan's draft environmental impact statement, which will be covered in the next item, and also through ongoing efforts to address residential capacity through House Bill 1923 enacted by the state legislature in 2019. The revisions to the boundary include the removal of approximately 140 acres between Columbia River Road and Taylor Flats Road. That's existing agricultural designated land by Franklin County. And there was also an addition of approximately 39 acres adjacent to Capitol Avenue near Pasco's industrial corridor to capitalize on the existing utilities along Capitol Avenue and to provide adequate industrial sites of large acreage. The proposed urban growth area alternative number 3, as shown in exhibit number 1, is the staff recommendation to the Planning Commission. So just to reiterate, staff is proposing to slightly revise the motion that was made at the June meeting to incorporate the specific reference to what we see as exhibit number 1. After review of the comprehensive plan's draft EIS, the comments we received from a variety of stakeholders and agencies, and also through ongoing efforts that staff have through House Bill 1923 and code amendments, we believe there was an opportunity to reduce the expansion request by roughly 100 acres to the urban growth area, thus making a much more appropriate urban growth area expansion application as it moves forward, eventually to Franklin County for final approval. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Gonzalez. Commissioners, do you have any questions or comments for city staff? I'm looking over at Mr. White.
I can't, for some reason, I cannot see the commissioners, but.
Hands raised or anything like that, and I don't hear anyone unmuting themselves. Do you have to unmute them?
Madam Chairman, the attendees tonight are all unmuted from this end. If they do want to speak, they would need to unmute themselves.
Thank you very
And I
much.
see a Carrie is unmuted at this time.
Would you care to speak, Commissioner?
Carrie is a representative from DNR.
Oh, DNI. Okay. Well, not seeing any commissioners who are interested in asking questions or commenting from city staff, we're going to ask the applicant to now come forward, introduce themselves. Please state your name and city of address for the record.
My name's Carrie Fagerness. I'm with the Department of Natural Resources, based out of Olympia. And I believe I'll probably just keep my comments until the next item, if that's correct. That's the DEIS that's going to be discussed.
Terrific. All right. Okay. So I will now open the public hearing. Any individuals who wish to speak on this particular item, now is the time to come forward and speak. Please state your name and city of address for the record. I'm looking over at Mr. White, who's shaking his head. All right. It does not seem that anyone else wishes to speak. So on this particular motion, what is the recommendation? Mr. Gonzalez?
Yeah, on page 2 of the staff report, we've prepared a revised motion for the Planning Commission for consideration.
Okay, I cannot find it right now. Can you read to me what that is?
You want me to read this?
Yes,
Okay.
please, Mr. Gonzalez.
Yep. The recommendation for the Planning Commission is to move the Planning Commission to close the public hearing, revising the motion made at the June 18th, 2020 Planning Commission meeting, and recommend to the Pasco City Council that the preferred urban growth area expansion be amended per Exhibit Number 1, Alternative Number 3, attached to the staff report dated August 20th, 2020.
Thank you very much, Mr. Gonzalez. Do we have any, all those in favor? Well, we want to second the motion.
Commissioner needs to make it.
Well, think
I
you
need to make the
This is
motion.
Commissioner Cochran. I'll move. I move the Planning Commission close the public hearing and revising the motion made on our June 18th, 2020 Planning Commission meeting and recommend to the Pasco City Council that the preferred urban growth area expansion be amended per Exhibit 1, which is alternative number 3, attached to the staff report dated August 20, 2020.
I'll second that.
Okay, a motion was made by Commissioner Cochran and seconded by Commissioner Rancière. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 All those opposed, say nay. Okay, I just said this, but let the record show it was moved by Commissioner Cochran and seconded by Commissioner Rancière, and the motion passed unanimously. Mr. Gonzalez, can you state the path forward?
Yes, along with the comprehensive plan EIS, which we'll talk about here shortly, staff will be taking the urban growth area item to the Pasco City Council on the 14th of September before official submittal to Franklin County in early October.
Thank you very much. We are now moving on to item B, comprehensive plan amendment. It's actually comprehensive plan update, MF number CPA 2020-002. And city staff, would you like to present the item? I believe we have Mr. Gonzalez once again.
Yes, good evening again, members of the Planning Commission. Following up on the urban growth area, the comprehensive plan has been through an extensive process to ensure that the results of the plan meet the stated goals of the Pasco City Council, mandates of the Growth Management Act, and ensuring the needs of the community have been addressed. The draft environmental impact statement is the focus of tonight's discussion. The draft EIS was released for public comment on May 15th, 2020, and was open through July 31st, a total duration of 75 days. In that time, staff received over 245 comments from a variety of commenters, including private property owners, environmental advocacy organizations, state agencies that include the Department of Commerce, Transportation, Historic Preservation, Natural Resources, from our Franklin County Planning Department, and also from community members here in the city of Pasco. Staff has provided the draft comments and responses to the draft EIS attached to the staff report for the Planning Commission to review. Although the primary purpose of the table is the DIS and the comments, although the purpose of tonight's discussion on this item is primarily the DEIS, the draft EIS comments. The table attached to the staff report includes comments that we've received on the comp plan, urban growth area, and the EIS. The next slide, it's kind of hard to wrap up all of the comments we've received in a few words, and we put together a word cloud, I believe that's available on the next slide, that shows basically the most common, or maybe not. Can you? Yeah. There it goes. Yeah, so apologies for that. This is a word cloud that basically summarized all of the phrases, statements, words in the that we received. Over 245 comments. Some of these obviously make a lot of sense. The word land use, development, residential, density, transportation, congestion, infill, design, all came up frequently throughout the comments of the EIS, the draft EIS. So it was staff's intention to here at least to showcase a little bit on what that looks like visually, although the comments and responses are available publicly. They are still in draft form, and they will be finalized prior to any adoption or final issuance of the EIS. In addition to the comments we received for the EIS, staff received additional letters and comments for this item at tonight's public hearing that concern the loss of agricultural lands and the land use designations of the future land use map. As far as next steps, staff is wrapping up the EIS and is planning to issue the final document within the next 2 weeks. Our target is the end of August. This will be followed up with a public hearing at the September 17th Planning Commission meeting for the comprehensive plan to include a recommendation of approval to the City Council to take place at the end of September with an adoption we're hoping for in early October. Following that council action, staff will be submitting both the urban growth area expansion application and the comprehensive plan to Franklin County for final approval. Staff is happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Gonzalez. Commissioners, do we have any questions or comments for city staff?
Commissioner Bowers, this is Commissioner Cochran. First, I have to say I spent a little bit of time reading through the massive table and how staff had compiled all the comments and responses and then all the responses to those. And I was super impressed. I know that must have been tedious, so thank you. That was pretty helpful for me because it was a point-by-point addressing of the comments that have come in, and it was super helpful to say, okay, for this is the rationale. And so I really appreciate that because I bet that was massively tedious. So thank you for that. So is the next steps then is that we are one of the comments was surrounding that the EIS or the DEIS hadn't been issued and it will be issued at the end of August. Is the way this works then is that we will accommodate some of the comments by being able to continue this to September and then even further out to the council so that the, DEIS has been published and then there will be more comments, and that allows for all the ample time addressing some of the comments that some of the respondents had. Is that the correct understanding?
Yeah, absolutely. That is exactly correct. We have made, it actually is what led to some of the minor modifications to the urban growth area, the prior item. Staff is now working with our consultant team to revise the necessary components, maps, tables, and figures of the comprehensive plan and the EIS document based on the comments we've received for this item.
And one other minor question related to those. I noticed that I think it was one of the organizations, FutureWise, noted that the EIS doesn't comply with the SEPA. Can you maybe educate me and the other commissioners on all that? I think you responded that you felt like we were well within the requirements of SEPA, but I didn't understand their points there. Maybe if you have a quick summary of that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think initially there was some concerns about the process itself when we made a motion of approval or recommended a approval at the June meeting.
Gotcha.
There were some concerns that maybe it was done too early. So staff also, in addition to those comments from that organization, received additional comments asking for us to extend the public comment period, which we did. So we definitely met the public process SEPA requirements for the public component of that, and we do believe we are fully compliant after discussing with Ecology that we've met SEPA requirements for the EIS itself.
Thanks much. That helps a lot. That's all I had.
Thank you, Commissioner Cochran. Any other commissioners? Speak now. Well, I am hoping that now we can have the applicant, DNR, come forward to speak. Please state your name and city of address again for the record.
Good evening, Planning Commission members. My name is Carrie Fagerness, and I am the Transition Lands Program Manager for the Department of Natural Resources, based out of Olympia.
Please.
Can you hear me?
Now we can. Yeah.
Okay. Sorry. I don't know how much you heard, but good evening, Planning Commission members. My name is Carrie Fagerness, and I'm the Transition Lands Program Manager for the Department of Natural Resources. I'm based out of Olympia. We appreciate the opportunity to submit comments to the city on the draft EIS for its proposed comprehensive plan amendments. Our official comments were submitted on July 28, 2020, and the concerns we raised are summarized by city staff on pages 53 and 54 in tonight's meeting packet. Staff has also included the entirety of the letter that we submitted as Exhibit P in the comments submitted for the comprehensive plan. I intend to just quickly summarize our concerns tonight and give you some background on DNR Transition Lands. My comments tonight are limited to the property we own east of Highway 395 and north and east of Highway 12. These parcels are identified internally by DNR as the North Pasco King City property and the Pasco industrial property, and total approximately 900 acres in 11 different parcels. The comprehensive plan amendments identified in the draft EIS as proposed by the city modify all of DNR's land use designations from industrial to DNR reserve area. DNR is requesting that the land use designation of industrial remain on all of its parcels in order to allow us to continue to prudently manage these parcels for the benefit of our trust beneficiaries. These parcels are included in the approximately 3 million acres of uplands that DNR manages across the state on behalf of our trust beneficiaries. These particular parcels are all common school trust, and revenue generated from these parcels go directly to help fund the public school system. DNR's fiduciary responsibility is to manage these lands similar to the way a private fiduciary would manage a trust portfolio. In DNR's case, based on RCW 4330-215, we are directed to achieve the maximum effective development and use of such lands and resources consistent with laws applicable hereto, which means that we are continually working at repositioning these assets to achieve the highest market return, either through disposition or ground lease on behalf of the underlying trust beneficiary. The parcels mentioned above have either been designated internally within DNR as urban due to their proximity within the city limits or UGA, or have been placed on our urban transition lands list due to their land use character and location. Based on this designation, management activities for these particular parcels include the following. Interim uses such as current and moderate timber or agricultural activities or continued short-term timber harvest or agricultural leasing. Planning activities including annexations, rezones, comp plan amendments, boundary line adjustments, public utility extensions, short plats or large lot subdivisions. Commercial ground leasing to private sector entities or brokerage firms upon completion of planning activities. And disposition, which could be direct sale to public agencies, public auction, or commercial land exchange, again, upon completion of planning activities. RCW 7919-100 and DNR's Internal Transition Lands Policy Plan, created in 1988 through direction from the legislature, causes DNR to work collaboratively with local jurisdictions as these lands transition into more urban type character. DNR will continue to manage these lands in accordance with all local land use regulations, but wanted to ensure that we communicated to you our internal management strategies related to these urban transition lands and our responsibilities as trust fiduciaries. DNR has several concerns with the proposed land use designation change. Our concerns are identified in our official comment letter in detail, but I will just quickly list the 5 concerns. The first one is that DNR reserve area is not defined. There's no definition of what DNR reserve area means other than to state that it is DNR land. This clearly doesn't articulate any meaning related to long-term planning within the comprehensive plan. Our second concern is that the reserve area is an ambiguous designation. The only information provided to us regarding the justification for this new land use designation was an excerpt from a Planning Commission meeting in 2018, in which city staff presented information to the Planning Commission speculating on existing and future use of DNR's land. The information provided in that statement is inconsistent with how we specifically manage these transition parcels. We cannot find in the supporting documents listed on the city's comprehensive plan webpage where the city justifies the land use designation change. The land capacity analysis does not identify DNR land, nor does it discuss the reason for its exclusion in the industrial land portion of the analysis. Our third concern is that we appear to be the only industrial property impacted. The city has removed only DNR land from its industrial land use classification. Purportedly, the reasoning is due to its current agricultural use or non-industrial use. If this is true, the same change should apply to all other industrial landowners in this area that are not currently developing their land industrially. The fact that only DNR land is singled out for proposed land use designation change is contrary to the intent of the GMA. The city addresses this comment on page 53 by stating that DNR is not the only property owner being removed from the industrial land use classification. While this is technically true, the circumstances instigating those changes are not comparable to DNR's land and our management intentions for our trust parcels. It seems that the examples given by the city are parcels that, 1, were requested by the owner to be removed from the industrial land use designation, 2, property purchased by the Confederated Tribes of the Colville Reservation and will be going into federal trust, and 3, property near the airport that is severely restricted based on air traffic. Our fourth concern is just compliance with comprehensive plan elements. As an amendment on modifying the land use designation from industrial to DNR reserve area is inconsistent with the existing and proposed policies of the comp plan. The existing inclusion of DNR's property within city limits and the UGA shows that the city recognizes the relevance of DNR's land to the city's historical and current growth patterns. Goal LU2A under the land use element chapter requires that the city maintain an adequate amount of industrial land, among other land uses, proximate to appropriate transportation and utility infrastructure. Removing DNR land from the industrial land use designation in order to add additional industrial land currently outside of city limits skirts the intent of this goal. DNR believes that its lands remain close to other developed industrial land, which includes city infrastructure, and clustering planned or future industrial development within close proximity to other industrial developments is good planning policy. Our fifth concern is land use appeals. Although the underlying zoning of light industrial would remain in place and would continue to allow permitted industrial uses on DNR's properties, the concern DNR has with the proposed land use designation changes relates to discretionary reviews and capital facility projects, both of which would require the reviewing party to turn to the comprehensive plan to ensure the proposal would meet the goals and policies. It seems that the intent by the city is to remove DNR land from the industrial land base and identify it as land that will not be developed. If that is the case, although it is unclear as DNR reserve area is not defined, then the land use designation and zoning no longer align with one another. And one could argue that any development on the DNR properties is not consistent with the intent of the comprehensive plan. Notwithstanding the above concerns, we would like to recognize and applaud the important economic development efforts being made by the city as well as the Port of Pasco. We believe the agency's intentions are good and this land use planning work is important in order to continue to move the region forward. As you may already know, DNR has worked with the city of Pasco in the recent past to successfully begin development of our land in the Road 68 interchange area, and we hope to continue this important partnership with the city as we look forward to managing these additional 900 acres within the city and UGA. We understand that the city and the Port of Pasco are eager to move the region forward economically, and DNR wants to be a part of that process. However, DNR wishes to maintain its industrial land use designation so we can ensure that we have every opportunity to provide value and revenue for our trust beneficiaries and comply with our fiduciary responsibilities as these properties evolve. This change in land use designation is not in the best interest of our trust beneficiaries, and we cannot support the proposed changes currently written and documented in the proposed comprehensive plan update. We look forward to working with the city to resolve these concerns and find a solution that works for us as well as the city of Pasco prior to adoption of the proposed comprehensive plan amendments. Thank you for your time.
Thanks, Ms. Figerness. All right. So do we have any questions or comments for the applicant, my fellow commissioners?
Hi there, this is Commissioner Cochran. So I read through the comments, I think on my notes they're on page 42 and 43 for DNR. In each case, point by point, again, the city staff responded. Do the responses, it seems like the responses, in most cases, the staff is basically saying, hey, we've got some more time. We're happy to work with you on, for example, working to change designations for DNR that suits the DNR ownership, specific language being added, clarifying the intent and purpose, including some industrial zoning, things like that. So it seems like that we're on the path to working with you towards a good compromise. Do you feel the point-by-point answers that the staff provided are kind of will address or have promise of addressing your concerns?
I think that they do. Our first choice would be to retain our industrial land use designation, and I'm not sure if that's still on the table or not. But with regards to the other things, the city has expressed interest in working with us on figuring out a solution to what our concerns are.
Great, thank you. Jacob, do you have any other thoughts on where you're going with that, or?
No, nothing additional outside of what's been shared in the responses in the comment matrix. The city is absolutely open to modifying language within the land use definitions and ensuring that we don't, limit the possibilities that DNR has with what their requirements are to do with that land that they own and operate here in the city of Pasco and the existing and future urban growth area. The city's intent is not to limit that. Our intent is to ensure that we've captured the overall needs for the entire urban growth area by creating a land use that allows development to occur with industrial zoning if it is necessary today, but also preserves it for future needs if so necessary by the Department of Natural Resources. So absolutely, we'd like to continue our discussions with the Department of Natural Resources to make sure that we have a plan that works for both agencies.
Thanks, that's great, sounds great.
Any other questions or comments from commissioners for the applicant? No. Mr. White is shaking his head. Oh, he can't see the commissioners. All right. Not hearing anyone piping up right now, I am going to go to opening the public hearing. So any individuals who wish to speak on this particular item, now is the time to come forward and speak. And we're going to ask you to state your name and city of address. I'm looking over at Mr. White. Perhaps you can see, you cannot see. All right, so, yes, Mr. White.
Yes, I can see those attendees that have signed in, but not the commissioners. And I don't see anybody that's indicated they wish to speak on this item. Any additional attendees?
So let me just ask this question. We did receive, no, I guess the most recent letters that we were handed today, I'm trying to think, they were on the next item, I believe. Oh no, one of them was actually on the comprehensive plan. And I'm assuming, Jacob, they didn't have a chance yet for you to comment on these?
Yeah, we've received four letters on the comprehensive plan item, the DNR, which just spoke right now. We also received a comment from FutureWise. We received a comment from a member of the general public that came in this morning. And we also received a letter from an attorney on behalf of a private property owner in the expanded urban growth area proposal.
So have you had a chance to respond to those in the matrix yet, or no?
Yeah, we believe all comments that we received within the last week for this item have all been addressed within the matrix.
Terrific, thank you. And just to remember that the recommendation is for us to extend the public hearing. So if we don't have anyone else piping up at the moment, I would entertain a motion. And now I have my piece of paper in front of me with the recommendation to continue the public hearing to the September 17th, 2020 Public Commission meeting. Do I need a motion for that? No. Right? Okay, so I don't need a motion. All right, we're good. We're just going to continue the public hearing. All right. So with that, we are now moving forward to the third item, C, which is a code amendment on street connectivity. This is MF number CA 2019-13. And city staff, would you like to speak to this?
Yes, good evening, members of the Planning Commission. The code amendment for street connectivity has been shared and discussed with the Planning Commission most of 2020. It began in December of 2019 as an informational item, if you remember. The proposed changes and creation of the new standard are based on the long-established goals and policies of the City of Pasco. The staff report included a supplemental document that summarized what has been shared with the Planning Commission throughout this effort. While this document was provided as a draft, it will be finalized prior to any formal recommendation and adoption by the Pasco City Council and Planning Commission. Along with this document, staff has prepared a presentation for the Planning Commission to review some of our findings that came out of that supplemental document. But again, to the slide that's present right now, again, the very basis and objective of this code was to meet long-established goals and policies that the City of Pasco has had in place. In fact, as mentioned in prior presentations, we have studies dating back from 1992 and 2003 that were conducted by transportation engineering firms on accessibility and connectivity north of 182. Obviously, north of 182 has been a high impact growth area for the city, and the importance of connectivity and ensuring that it is in place for the future, at the time, the future residents of the City of Pasco. You'll see later on this presentation if what we have works. In addition, I'd also like to mention that prior to, I believe, 1988, the city standards actually were much different than what we have today, and we'll see that as we move forward with the presentation. I think it's also important to note that in addition to the existing plans and policies we have on the screen, we have the ongoing comprehensive plan, we have the ongoing transportation system master plan, and the City of Pasco also is working and collaborates with local and state organizations such as Ben Franklin Transit, the Benton Franklin Council of Governments, the Washington State Department of Transportation, and also are authorized to work under the Washington State Growth Management Act and their planning goals identified in RCW 3670A. Next slide. So we've covered many of the identified benefits of a well-connected transportation system in prior meetings, from increased walkability and accessibility to better looping of utility systems. This graphic here obviously is very generalized, but we believe it depicts the benefits sufficiently here. Increasing connectivity will have positive benefits for the members of our community and the services the city provides. Some of the benefits are easier to identify. Increased connectivity obviously means more route choices for our residents, but they also impact affordable housing and utility planning. In fact, the toolkit from the White House in 2016 identified that smart housing regulations include optimization of the transportation system that reduce commute times, increase access, and the use of public transit, biking, and walking. And on the utility side, the National Association of Home Builders recently stated that more efficient development patterns and street connectivity allow for more frequent looping of water systems to better balance pressure, decrease water line sizes, and reduce the cost of water infrastructure for developments. In addition, a study by Smart Growth America that surveyed small, mid-sized, and large communities identified that smart growth and connectivity measures can decrease municipal service costs by 10%. So while on the screen here we have a very generalized example of connectivity and not, the next slide is much more local. On the left you have Central Pasco with, and this is probably a graphic I've shared with the Planning Commission before, public facilities, one of the state's largest high schools, one of the largest stadiums in the region at Edgar Brown Stadium, a large commercial corridor on 20th and Court to the left. And you can see that in the green, there is much more opportunity to access these public facilities and the neighborhoods we live in. On the right, we have an example of somewhat the opposite pattern. We still have a elementary school, we have a neighborhood park, and in green, you can see the more direct options at Sanderford, that very South Street there with Burns on the top. So in green, you see the more direct options, and those streets you see outlined in orange offer those that require residents to go through meandering roadways to access the very same facilities that they live right next to. So kind of a generalized example and what we actually have here in place in the city of Pasco. So prior to the recommendation, staff reviewed existing conditions, specifically the two most critical components of connectivity: block length and block perimeter. As discussed in prior meetings, both of these metrics can significantly affect whether a community is accessible to its residents or not. This slide compares both block length and perimeter with cities in our state. In both graphics, Pasco is the third highest in terms of block length maximum as determined by municipal code requirements in all of our cities, and also the block perimeter. Cities of all sizes in both urban and rural settings have shorter block lengths and slightly shorter block perimeters. You can see that there's a diversity of cities listed on both of these graphics. Again, Pasco in purple with much higher block length requirements and block perimeter that exists in our cities today. So this is what that looks like spatially on the map. These are census blocks in the city of Pasco. We can ignore those, the dark red, because obviously in the northeast side that's very industrial and not developed. On the southeast side, a large portion of that is vacant industrial, and the Sacagawea State Park, there is some minor development that is there around A Street, and on the very northwest side, that's Broadmoor, that's not yet developed. The more green, the less distance, the shift towards orange and red, the longer block perimeter patterns. You can see that as Pasco is developed towards the north and west over the last 30 or so years, that block patterns has significantly increased in size. And as we remember from the prior slide, block perimeter is one of the key components to addressing walkability and connectivity in our communities. This slide shows the percentage of households in block size by acreage. So The highest average amount of households are within the block areas that range between 9 and 17.5 acres. So across all of these cities listed here, the highest average households live within 9 to 17.5 acres. 43% of Pasco households are within that block range. 40% of our households are in blocks below 9 acres. The Tri-Cities differs from other cities in eastern Washington, such as Spokane, Wenatchee, Ellensburg, where the majority of their residents reside in blocks smaller than 9 acres. So this is just another way of visualizing the different way our households across many of our communities in the state reside within their block development patterns. Next slide, please. This is a slide that was, I believe, shared at the last Planning Commission meeting. This is a walk score for the Pasco School District facilities here in Pasco. The majority of public schools in Pasco are well below the national average. Only 8 schools have scores classified as somewhat walkable or above. We have 13 schools here locally that are in car-dependent neighborhoods, meaning walking, biking, or even taking transit to school are not a realistic option, placing a burden on parents, caregivers, or district transportation providers. You can see Pasco is that purple block. The national average is in green. You can see Pasco as a whole, as a city, is below the national average. You can also see the Pasco School District average with the outline in purple below the national average. You can see the Pasco Tri-Cities is relatively the same. That line across is the 50% threshold. The majority of our schools do not come close to meeting that walk score, meaning that our schools are not in walkable environments. This slide shows the household costs. So when communities are heavily auto-oriented, there is a potential to affect household costs for transportation. On the left, the chart shows the annual transportation cost per household for 17 cities in our state. Pasco is third highest with an annual cost of $14,500. This is higher than Kennewick, Richland, Yakima, Tacoma, and Spokane. Household size does not appear to have an impact on this statistic either, as Central Pasco between 395 and Oregon Avenue have similar or higher household sizes. The map on the right displays the cost per household in Pasco for transportation costs. Again, we begin to see a potential correlation between costs and other metrics and the underlying development patterns on this slide and over the next few slides. These two maps show cul-de-sac and dead ends overlaid with intersection density. Intersection density is the number of nodes or intersections in a given area, in this case per acre. We can see a higher number of cul-de-sacs in lower density areas. I think that's expected to be given. Those are the orange dots. And the underlying color of blue means the intersection density is higher, and the more orange, the less the intersection density. So you can see a correlation between those that are blue with less cul-de-sacs, higher density, more cul-de-sacs, less connectivity intersection nodes. The map on the right shows vehicle miles traveled. Comparing the two maps, side-by-side, communities with lower intersection densities have higher VMT rates. Now, it's important to note, obviously, that there's more to the way we travel in our vehicles or by any mode than just the amount of intersections or cul-de-sacs. Land use is an important factor in this as well, which is why our comprehensive plan has identified more areas for mixed uses within proximity of each other. Again, a planning goal for the Growth Management Act. And next slide, please. There's also an impact to the environment. Transportation is one of the largest contributors to U.S. greenhouse gas emissions, approximately 28% in 2018. Light-duty vehicles and medium-heavy trucks accounted for 82% of all transportation emissions. This graphic here shows that the average emissions per household for 17 cities in Washington, Pasco has the second highest, second only to West Richland, higher than cities in much urban areas and much more rural areas. Next slide, please. So this is a map that is derived from the ongoing Transportation System Master Plan. As we mentioned before, very early on in that process, our staff and our consulting team identified barriers to connectivity for multimodal connectivity in the city of Pasco. If you overlay this map with the ones we just saw, you can begin to see the pattern continue to emerge where the majority of our connectivity barriers exist in areas with higher block lengths, longer block perimeters, and more cul-de-sacs. You can see that shaded in that blue color, and you can see roads that were just completed, such as Chapel Hill or Burns, already face connectivity barriers. These are outputs from the Transportation System Master Plan Survey that ended in July, and these will be updated. The final results were just provided to staff on last Friday, so these will be updated in a final report. But again, you can see on the left, those dots in pink represent sidewalk and accessibility concerns from members of the public who participated in the survey. Again, it's pretty easy to delineate Road 68, Burden Boulevard show up pretty clear on this map. On the right in purple, you see crossing and crosswalk concerns and barriers. Again, the very similar same pattern begins to emerge predominantly in West Pasco. Next slide, please. This is cycling concerns. Again, it's important for us to note that the transportation system is required to work for all users of the roadway. So in here we see cycling concerns for members of the public. There's a little bit more of a slightly different spatial distribution here. We see a few concerns in East Pasco, predominantly along A Street and Road 40 South near Sacagawea State Park, along downtown 4th Avenue and Lewis Street. Again, Court Street, Argent, Road 68, Santa Fe, Burden all show up pretty thoroughly on this map as well, as identified by members of our public here in Pasco. A few examples of barriers we have in Pasco again. So on the top left, you see one that if you've read through the comprehensive plan EIS comments, you'll see that we've already received significant concerns along Road 90 and Broadmoor Boulevard and Burns Road, where 2 new public schools are set to open here in the near future. Both schools will have lack of accessibility to them. That road was just completed and that area is rapidly growing. You can see on the bottom left the meandering route it takes to get between Broadmoor Boulevard and Road 68. That is the only east-west connection to make outside of Burns and Santa Fe. You can see again on the bottom middle, again a lack of connectivity. Same at the top, which you saw earlier in the slide. And the 2 slides on the 2 photos on the right, I think, are almost disheartening because you can see that both have new developments that took place in an area that had more of the connectivity pattern. However, the new developments have eliminated that with their designs. You can see that identified in red. So a few more examples of what we have here in Pasco, what the residents are telling us they want us to address. While this is a very local concern, as we mentioned on one of the first slides, that the City of Pasco works with and collaborates with a variety of agencies, the Washington State Department of Transportation, the Benton Franklin Council of Governments, Ben Franklin Transit, Visit Tri-Cities. You heard from the Pasco Fire Department Fire Chief last month, and also the Somos Pasco effort, which was an effort that involved both Franklin County, the Council of Governments, and the City of Pasco. All of these represent thousands of residents in our region, in our city. All of them provided letters of support for this effort staff is pursuing. And we believe it's important for us to again reiterate that while staff definitely understands that there is going to be some concerns on the private side and maybe on the public side about what this change means for future growth in the City of Pasco, I think it's important for us to note that, number one, this is already a goal established by council. Number two, that goal is reiterated by the agencies and numerous others that you see here on this screen. So this is the change right here. Now the staff report goes a little bit more thoroughly into the text. However, this is the change that staff is proposing to make. A maximum block length of 660 feet, a maximum block perimeter of 1,760 feet, a cul-de-sac maximum of 400 feet, and connection to adjacent properties. Now, the current cul-de-sac minimum is 300 feet, so we're actually increasing that. The connection to adjacent community properties already exists in our code, but it is hard to enforce as staff because the wording is not consistent. The maximum block length is a decrease. Right now, the current maximum is 1,320 feet, and as I mentioned earlier in this presentation, prior to the mid-'80s, the requirement was between 400 and 600 feet. So at one point in time, Pasco actually had a pretty compact requirement for developments to occur. Obviously that changed, and Pasco, along with dozens of other cities across the country, are trying to correct that. So this is the recommendation from staff. Happy to answer any questions from the Planning Commission. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Gonzalez. I'd like to ask commissioners, do you have any questions or comments? I'm looking at Mr. White. Can you see? You cannot see anything. I am not.
This is Commissioner Cochran. I certainly want to allow somebody else to go if there is, but I had a couple of questions. So
Go ahead.
Jacob, can you remind me when the comment period started and the public hearing started for this issue? I don't recall it was last month, but it was also May.
Yes, I believe this actually is the third public hearing for this item. We haven't.
That's what I was recalling too. So, so the only thing I noticed is great support from obviously the community as well as some of the government, non-government agencies. A couple of letters that came in were really, not supportive, which were the two developer perspectives, which maybe, I don't know if they're here tonight to speak, but I was curious. I don't see the developers, both developer perspectives cite that this will, decrease the densities and increase the cost, the development costs on a per lot basis, as well as, also create some utility issues that they cited. But have they proposed, did you get any alternate proposals or ideas from the developers, or just that they don't like what the recommendation is? Because I mean, it'd be interesting to say, yeah, we don't like this, but it'd be more interesting if they said, here's a better idea, or here's something that would be a compromise. Have you received any feedback like that?
Staff hasn't received specific feedback on this item outside of the letters and some of the public testimony at the prior Planning Commission meetings.
Okay. Those are the questions I had. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner
Hi,
Cochran.
this is Commissioner Myron.
Commissioner Myron, please.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Gonzalez, for the presentation. In looking at the proposed language in the new proposed code section, it's under lots and blocks, chapter 2120. The proposed code would specifically exclude heavy commercial and industrial zones from these requirements. Obviously, when you have a large industrial area, it'd be difficult to fit into those requirements. Any consideration for maybe having different requirements based on zoning density, and whether or not that could be a possibility? Some of the needs of a higher density development, like we'll continue to see in the Broadmoor area, those needs seem to be different than what you might find south of the highway in West Pasco, more of a suburban density.
Yeah, you're correct in the reasoning for the heavy commercial and industrial, and not, I guess, having them comply with these updated standards. We don't want to limit a large factory from moving to the city of Pasco. However, on the residential and light commercial side, staff believes, and its general best practice is that no matter the density, communities benefit from increased connectivity and accessibility, regardless of an apartment complex or 20 single-family dwelling units. The fire department still has to get there. And I think as the city continues to grow and as our code continues to evolve, there's also an opportunity for land use amendments. So what is medium density today might not be medium density in 10 years. And if that area had different requirements, they may no longer be, I guess, conforming to what the community expects. So we have looked at that. There are some communities that do try to go that level of defining certain zones and block patterns. However, we don't believe it's in the best interest, and based on what we've heard from comments and goals, to move forward with that specific of a code and also that scale, sort of a sliding scale. We don't believe that would be appropriate for this code amendment.
Do you think thank you for that response. Do you think as maybe position step, rather than mandating a specific block length, that implementing the requirement for connection to adjacent properties would be a positive first step that would improve connectivity in some of the newer developments as kind of a bridge measure?
Thank you. That actually is already in our code. Connection to adjacent properties is already in the Pasco Municipal Code. The extension of existing streets is in our code. I think besides this effort from staff, I think the other component is for staff to continue to take a comprehensive approach when we have preliminary plats and developments being proposed to the city, is to ensure that we do refer back to those policies that we saw towards the beginning of this presentation and ensure that they are in compliance with them. Those are ordinances adopted by the city of Pasco, by the city council. And so I think the other component of this is staff, is us also ensuring that we're applying the PMC as thoroughly as necessary.
Great, thank you. And I think the last thing I would say again is, in my opinion, I think scenario 2 it's a big jump from where we're at today. One of the things that I feel when I'm driving in a higher, maybe a grid pattern neighborhood, is that there are a lot of intersections, and that can. I feel like when I'm driving in those neighborhoods, oftentimes I'm stopping at multiple stop signs. I'm watching for pedestrians, and it can be difficult to be a pedestrian and a driver with multiple intersections. Has there been any study on just the travel time and some of the trade-offs of connectivity, or just the fact that there are many stops to make with multiple intersections? That'll be my last comment. Thank you.
Yes, absolutely. And I think hopefully you'll see that I put a draft watermark on the document, on the supplemental document, and that's because I didn't incorporate the local road safety plan that was just adopted by the Pasco City Council. That was an effort led by our Public Works Department, specifically at safety for auto and bike ped users in the city. And the results from that survey, or from that analysis, indicated that while there may be more conflicts because of intersections, the more serious injuries and fatalities happen in along corridors that have limited access because of the higher speeds. So while you may have to stop a few additional times within a neighborhood, you're also stopping at 15 miles per hour, 10 miles per hour, 20 miles per hour versus 35 or 45. So it limits the seriousness of injuries on our streets.
Great, thank you, Mr. Gonzalez.
Any other commissioners interested in asking questions or commenting?
This is Commissioner Campos.
Please, Commissioner Campos.
Jacob, I just want to thank you for making this presentation. You laid it out pretty clear for us to understand. I just want to make sure that I have the full view of it. I know that we had some comments saying that there would be some negative consequences. Can you give us a little bit more what those could possibly be? I know they listed a few of them, but is there any other thing that we're kind of not seeing as commissioners as part of maybe the negativity side of it?
Yeah, we did make a notation within the supplemental document that while the overwhelming consensus from planning, engineering, economic development professionals and academic research shows that the connectivity benefits far outweigh the perceived, consequences. There are some for us to consider, and we need to address them as well. Obviously, there is a perception that the cul-de-sac is the perceived or the preferred development pattern for a private homeowners. They may they may enjoy the privacy that a cul-de-sac offers. There's also with the maximum block length and block perimeters, there is going to be added infrastructure necessary by the initial development to occur. So obviously there's going to be some additional costs on the front of when when they are constructed. However, as I mentioned earlier in this presentation, cities that have begun to implement more connectivity in their patterns in combination with better land use practices have seen a decrease in municipal service costs, because once these developments are built, it is the city's responsibility and the ratepayers who have to pay for the ongoing maintenance. And so that's where efficiency becomes a critical component for them. So I do understand and acknowledge the letters that we received, specifically because these are these are significant changes. However, I have to reiterate back to the very first slide that these are the goals of the Pasco City Council. We are trying to implement them through these code changes. I would say if there's other ways to meet these specific goals without requirements, they haven't occurred yet under our existing code. I think we'd be happy to hear any of those, I guess, options, but we haven't received any. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Jacob.
All right. Any other commissioners? I will take this moment, Mr. Gonzalez, to pose a question to you. So 3 of the letters that we received this evening, asked that the public hearing be extended, and I'm sorry, that the motion to close the public hearing be removed, so that it could be extended, and call for a meeting between these developers, people in the development community, and city staff. So I'm just curious whether you would be amenable to that. Has this happened as yet?
Well, staff will abide by what's recommended by the Planning Commission here tonight. I again reiterate that this would be the 3rd public hearing. We haven't heard specific feedback on what maybe the home builders would like to see in terms of a code. We would have considered that and included that into this amendment, but we haven't received anything in writing, phone call, or throughout the public hearings we've held here so far.
Thank you very much. All right, so we do not have the applicant because that is you. So I am now going to open the public hearing. Any individuals who wish to speak on this particular item, now is the time to come forward. Please state your name and city of address for the record. And Mr. White, you are not able to see people raising hands, correct?
No, I can.
Oh, you can.
Brian is the first hand raised.
Okay. Brian, name and address, please. I mean, name and city of address for the record.
Okay, can you guys hear me?
We can.
Okay, this is Brian Thorson with Hayden Homes. Address is 2464 Southwest Glacier Place. That's in Redmond, Oregon. Good evening. Thank you for allowing me to speak tonight. You know, Hayden Homes was one of the developers that submitted a letter yesterday. We had just recently found out about the code change yesterday as well. You know, so in response to some of the commissioners' questions about, you know, if the developers proposed any solutions, the answer at this point is no, because we haven't had a chance to do so. And so this is our way of asking by the letters that have been submitted by pushing the removing the closing of the public hearing and extending it and allowing us to be able to sit down with city staff and discuss the options would be of great value, I think, to everybody, because you know, there's many of us that work in many of these other jurisdictions that you guys showed on those earlier slides that have a lot of great things. There's great things about all the cities, and if we can sit down and work something out and propose some different solutions that would work for everyone, I think would be great. You know, city engineering has done a great job. They've been doing standard plan updates, and engineering has reached out to the development community and to the HBA, and we've had those, just developer meetings, if that's what you want to call them, together, and we've been asked for our input, and we've provided input, but there's been nothing, no outreach at all regarding the street connectivity change that the city's working through right now. And so that's why there's been no proposed solutions by the developers. I mean, we'd love to propose some solutions other than what's going on right now, because the cost impact is significant when you look at it. And, you know, we can certainly break down those impacts if we have the chance to sit down and meet. So we're asking if you can remove the motion to close the hearing and extend it to allow us that time to sit down with staff and try and work something out.
Thank you so much, Mr. Thorson. Next, Mr. White.
Patrick?
Yep. Hello there. Yep. Can you hear me?
We can.
Okay, good. Thank you. My name is Patrick Pittenger. I penned a letter on June 4th to the city as the Transportation Planning Director for the Benton Franklin Council of Governments. The Benton Franklin Council of Governments is responsible for regional planning activities, including travel demand modeling, transportation demand management, and the Council of Governments also has a role to actually certify the city's comprehensive plan as well. And the agency, Benton Franklin Council of Governments, sent that letter being very supportive of this proposal. The relationship between land use and transportation is key. And we urge you to approve this, frankly, because this opportunity that you have now, and we applaud your staff for putting this before you, the opportunity you have to affect land use, you only get it once. And the city is at a point where obviously of rapid development, you guys know that very well. Often you don't get to have a big impact with land use, but you guys do because you're in a rapid land use condition. And once that land use happens, you can't change it. It is what it is, right? So I wrote this letter as the Transportation Planning Director, and I'm still here. I'm here presenting to you today. But I have to say that I actually left my position a few days ago. I was hired away by another agency, and I still live in Richland, by the way. I forgot to tell you that. I live in Richland, and I am still a professional planner with a different governmental agency. I did make sure to inform the Benton Franklin Council of Governments that I would be here this evening to be supportive of this, even though I'm now doing it as their former Transportation Planning Director. And there's a representative here tonight listening to this. But very importantly, there's been mentions of negative impacts, and there's been questions of costs. And I would argue that the current development pattern that you've been experienced have today extensive negative impacts and extensive costs. And a lot of them have already been touched on by your own staff. It comes to you in travel time, it comes to you in safety, It comes to you in the health of your residents. It comes to you, things like kids being able to walk to school. It comes to you in air quality. This area is on the verge of going into a non-attainment area for air quality for ozone. If that happens, that will have a significant impact both on transportation and on development permitting processes here in the area, a significant economic impact. The preservation, all those cul-de-sacs, all that asphalt, you got to maintain that forever. It's not the developers, that's the city. And the fact of the matter is that Pasco, like every other city around here, this isn't, just Pasco, you don't have the money to maintain these roads as it is. You need to have the most efficient method possible because you're already in a difficult position as that is. So, could there be increased costs in the short term for a developer? I wouldn't deny that. Could there be a negative from their eyes? Yes, because they've been selling people the idea that the cul-de-sac is the ideal method. But I can tell you, as a person who's done this for 24 years in 3 states, I've seen this played out over and over again. It's a broken record. And I've had it happen in this state and others. In this community, right here, we have regional transportation planning meetings and people come up to us and say, I thought this was a good idea, this development, but now I realize, the traffic's not good. My kids can't walk to school. There are a lot of bad impacts of, circuitous routings to get to a park. A lot of people are not happy with what they get, with what the developers are building them. So I implore you to, to do this and to make sure that you take advantage of this opportunity because your development is, I am very confident that it will continue and it will do just fine. Having done this for a long time, and I worked for a city for 11 years, and so even though it wasn't Pasco, I'm very confident that you'll be just fine, and that the developers will be fine. And what you'll do is you'll be doing right by your citizens. And I just say I agree with the comments that were shared with your staff that probably said a more eloquent guy than I did, as far as the benefits far outweighing the cost. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Pittenger, and congratulations on your new job.
Thank you very much. I'm now a federal employee, but I'm not speaking on their behalf. I'm on my own time.
Keith?
Keith?
I did unmute myself. Can you hear me?
Can.
Perfect. So my name is Keith Hall. I'm the Director of Planning and Service Development at Ben Franklin Transit, and we're in Richland, just across the river from Pasco. I am speaking on BFT's behalf from a transit perspective, but if you would indulge me, I'd like to kind of talk on a personal level a little bit. I grew up in a city in Texas, roughly the size of that Pasco is today. And I lived in an area that would be incredibly familiar as one of the neighborhoods, maybe just east of Road 68. When I was about 6 years old, we lived in a subdivision on the Main Street entrance. We were one of the earlier houses. And so it was the main entrance that branched off into numerous other streets. There weren't so many cul-de-sacs like you see in that part of Pasco. But the neighborhoods don't have very many entrances and exits. So at 6 years old, I walked across the street one day, somebody was speeding and I was in a hit and run accident. If I could show you a PowerPoint presentation, I'd have a cute little cast of me in a cast and on crutches at that age. Luckily, we had good health insurance. It was a hit and run. They never found the person, but I never really had any impacts out of that. Growing older, I began to cycle around my neighborhood. Again, it was fairly well connected. The barriers were always the arterial streets. There were some natural barriers, but really the ones you couldn't cross were the higher speed arterial streets, which are pretty familiar in Pasco. I continued cycling through college, through grad school, and in various cities that I've lived and worked in, I walked to work, bike to work. These are cities like Toronto, Seattle, Houston, Auckland. You see, I've traveled around a bit, and I've lived and worked in lots of cities where, where I was able to walk and bike to work or transit as well. As a transit planner, I spent a lot of my time working in the private sector, which took me around to the different geographies. But my first and foremost interest is basically trying to design a transit system that's accessible to the most number of people who want to use it, emphasis on want to use it, and have easy access to do so. But easy access is really fundamental to having good transit. From a professional perspective, I've actually worked on a similar project as this, where we actually tightened up. We did it in a different way, but the effect was intended to tighten up neighborhoods, make them more connected, and really minimize walking distances to arterial streets where you're more likely to start leading into commercial areas, where transit is more likely to be, and in neighborhoods that are really just easier to walk around overall. That project was adopted in 2010, and some of the first subdivisions came out, which if I could, I'd also show you some great little photos of that, under the new standard, where you really do see a difference in the types of streets. They're slower, the neighborhood streets are slower, they're safer. In that context, they incorporated flood control and sustainability standards for stormwater runoff. But they included sidewalks. You saw thorough sidewalks, easy crossings throughout these neighborhoods. From a BFT perspective, we deal with these issues daily. In much of Pasco and much of Kennewick, for example, when we actually want to put a bus stop shelter in, we can't meet the Americans with Disabilities Act requirements because your right-of-way is too narrow for us to put proper landing pads. We then have to go into private agreements with adjacent landowners to build those bus stops. Many of them are not always agreeable to that, which basically means we've just created another difficulty for people with mobility limitations to get around. The same holds true with kids. A third of our riders are school-aged children who don't have cars and don't have driver's licenses yet. And we have a large number of senior citizens. So those are our fundamental riders today. We don't have as many choice riders, but we do carry some of the most vulnerable people in our society. The things we deal with today, the city of Richland asked us to remove a bus stop on Keene Road. That basically means we're almost a mile between bus stops, and the bus stop we're removing is almost a perfect intersection of a pedestrian pathway, the bike trail, and the front entrance of a subdivision, another one of these one-entrance subdivisions. So the real challenge for us is, we have to work within the environment that you give us. We can't solve the problems for every person who needs mobility without cooperation of the city. One of our recent initiatives was our BFT Connect service. You might have seen the rather sharp new black vans running around town. It's a type of on-demand service that links people to transit. During the current pandemic, it's also taking people to healthcare, food services, food banks, and grocery stores. But our view of that, it's really a $2 million a year budget that we spend to overcome car-oriented land uses and car-oriented disconnected street design. We make daily compromises on bus stop locations and design in all of the cities that we serve at the expense of higher speed traffic or more traffic. Ultimately, we commend the work certainly of the city of Pasco staff on this. We think they did a great job, and we are fully supportive of this initiative. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hall. Mr. White, who's next?
I don't see any additional hands raised. But again, I cannot see the commission members themselves.
Can you guys still hear me?
Yeah, we can
This is
hear you.
Brian.
Yes, please.
So, Caleb Stromstad is on the phone and he would like to speak. So do they have the ability to give their input as well if they're calling in on the phone?
One second.
Brian, is it available in a speakerphone type call? Maybe we'll be able to hear that. I don't see a caller listed as a attendee.
He said he was listening on his Said he was listening on his phone.
Just a moment,
Hang on a
Brian.
second.
We
I'm
have,
listening on my phone. This should be able to unmute me when it's time for comments, is what he thought.
okay, well, it is time for comments, so if he can unmute himself, we would be happy to hear.
Brian,
Yes.
he may be able to try 1-562-247-8422.
Okay.
And there's an access code, of course. And that is
Okay.
133-144-470.
Okay, hang on 1 second while
Okay.
I send this over to him. Sorry.
That's quite all right. While we're waiting, does anyone else want to speak? Does not appear. Anyone has raised a hand?
Hey,
Oh, we hear
Chairman
somebody.
Powers, this is Commissioner Cochran.
Oh,
I had a question for staff while we're reading that might help clarify. So if we made a motion today to move on to city council, there's still adequate time, I believe, right? Because this goes to city council and there will be further recommendations, further testimony in public forum for city council. Are there opportunities in that interim period for you to have conversations with the developers for alternative solutions that might be able to modify this, or is it too late once we make the motion?
Commissioner Cochran, no, that's a good point. Actually, I was struggling to find a way to get to that. Actually, this is a legislative decision. It's not a site-specific land use action, so there's plenty of opportunity for that to occur at city council level. If the commission is of a mind, though, I would recommend that we do that prior to your formal recommendation to council so that you have the benefit and we can engage with the development community to at least give them a chance, assuming that the issue about notification is genuine, that there is a chance for them to propose an alternative. Yes, the technical answer is yes, there is time, but I believe the commission would be better represented by having that occur prior to your recommendation if the commission is inclined in that direction.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I think I'm sympathetic towards the desire to meet and provide solutions if they can do that. And I mean, I'm less sympathetic because I think there's also a responsibility on the development community to look at public notices and websites. And, the fact that they found out yesterday is probably not the city's fault because they published this, well in advance. But maybe there's a little bit of help that, meeting in the middle will help kind of have that conversation. And if there are really creative solutions that are a good compromise, maybe it's worth it. That's my 2 cents.
But in developers' defense,
okay.
it's hard to be up to speed on what everyone's doing in every jurisdiction. I mean,
Is
for me
this
personally,
Caleb
I've
speaking?
got 15 or 20. Pardon?
Hi, no, is this Brian?
This is Brian, sorry.
Okay. All right, Brian. Please finish.
Oh, yeah, it's hard to be up to speed on what every municipality's doing. And, a lot of times when things like this come up, I mean, most places reach out and the city of Pasco has with engineering, but, they didn't with something like this that does have some cost impact to development, which will inevitably get passed on to the consumer. And when affordable housing is an issue, you know, every cost increase to a lot and development and whatnot, it increases the price of the house. So, you know, it's, that's it. And then Caleb is on that number, Rick, that you provided, and I think Steve Bauman from RP is as well. They both can't figure out how to get unmuted. They're unmuted on their phones, but I think they're muted by the city somehow.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Thorson. I'm looking over at Mr. White to see if we can figure out how to,
It says all are unmuted.
okay.
I don't know.
So apparently our line says everyone is unmuted. So the recommendation, again, is to close the public hearing. And I can entertain a motion.
Commissioner Bauer, maybe,
Please.
maybe the commissioners could have a discussion about, I mean, I honestly, as a commissioner, I'm open either way. I'm happy, you know, I've heard, you know, got good comments. I'm happy to move it forward with a motion, but I'm also happy to be sympathetic to the development community to provide creative solutions, not just, you know, problems, right? It'd be great to say, look, it's bad for us, but hey, we have an alternate suggestion that's good for both of us. I'd be open to that and kind of continuing it, but if the consensus of the commissioners is that's, you know, they'd like to move it forward, I'm okay with that too. So maybe it'd be worthwhile before we do a motion about where we kind of come down on that.
Thank you very much.
I guess the question is, do any of the other commissioners have any feedback?
Commissioner Cochran, maybe what I will do is go down the roll and find out the sentiment of each commissioner. I will remove myself from going last. How about Commissioner Mendez? Mendez isn't here. All right, how about we miss Jay Campos, right? He's not on? You're on, Jay Campos.
Okay, so I'm kind of on the same page with Jerry in terms of like when you're looking at proposals, I mean, that's your responsibility. You kind of go out there, but I also think it's the same thing. Like, yeah, I'm on the fence, but I'm pretty much right on board with what Jerry's.
Commissioner Cochran said. Okay, you went out, Jay Campos. Let me go to A Campos.
Commissioner Campos, yeah, I would love to go ahead and just continue the public hearing just to hear what the developers have to say, kind of see their ideas, and that way you give us I guess a bigger whole perspective on it so that we can make the right recommendation.
Thank you very much, Commissioner A. Campos. Commissioner Myram.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. I'm not opposed to extending this conversation. It is something that's been before us since December of 2019, and voices from the development community and other community members who have come forward, and those have been welcome contributions. I would say, you know, if we extend it another month, we do that, but then that's kind of our hard date. I don't think we should continue extending month after month, but I would be open for an additional extension if there's a sincere desire to put forward some unique plans.
Thank you, Commissioner Myram. Commissioner Rancière.
Helps if I know how to unmute myself. I agree with the general consensus that keeping the public hearing open until September 17th would be acceptable to me as long as we still did the deliberations and recommendation on that same meeting as well. I don't see the point in extending that part.
Thank you, Commissioner Rancière, and I myself concur with the fellow commissioners. So on that note, we are going to continue the public hearing until the September commission meeting, and at that commission, we will close the public hearing and come to a final recommendation.
And just for note, Madam Chair, I still do not and cannot seem to connect to anyone trying to call in at this point.
Okay.
But however, the meetings are continued, so that helps.
Okay, thank you very much. So that was the last item in our public hearing. We are now within workshop. We have other business. The information is regarding the transportation impact fee, which is MF Info 2020-16.
Good evening again, members of the Planning Commission. Transportation impact fee on this item. It's a one-time charge assessed by the City of Pasco on new developments to help pay for new or expanded public facilities that will directly address the increased demand those services create. This is authorized by the Washington State Growth Management Act, RCW 8202, and through the Washington Administrative Code as well. And so the purpose of this is actually to implement also something that was identified in our transportation system master plan and by staff, and that was that when the existing transportation impact fee ordinance was adopted, it only applied to roughly a third of the city west of 20th Avenue. And so as the city has grown and as we work with a hopefully new comprehensive plan that has new land uses spread out throughout the city, staff along with our team with the transportation master plan believe it would be in our best interest to apply that standard across the entire city. Since 2015, there's been 1,700 permits total east of 20th Avenue that haven't been subject to the impact fee. So obviously there's a loss. We're going to hopefully see some new residential development continue to occur. And we'd like to ensure that the residents that live in the city of Pasco have a safe and efficient system on which to travel on. So this is just an informational item for Planning Commission to be aware about. I do believe, I'm not sure if this will come back to the Planning Commission. I do believe it'll be in front of council in the future, but more of an informational for the Planning Commission members to be aware about.
Thank you very much, Mr. Gonzalez. I want to ask a question. Why was it that only new developments west of 20th Street were impacted by that fee? Is that because of census tracts?
No, if I understand correctly, and I'm not sure I do because sometimes the stories change depending on who you speak with, but there was a consensus that east of 20th Avenue would hinder commercial and industrial development. And then I've also heard that the city was actually trying to promote residential development in East Pasco, and this was another way to do it by eliminating the impact fee. I'm not sure which of those is more accurate, but it's important, I think, for the commission to understand that this doesn't just apply to homes. For example, the city is entertaining 2 proposals right now for significant truck facilities in the way of truck stops in the industrial corridor on the east side of Highway 395, east and west side of Highway 395. And they will definitely impact the transportation system and should contribute their fair share to transportation improvements that are necessary by those developments. This is also connected with the first ever transportation system master plan that you've heard Mr. Gonzalez mention several times tonight. So all in all, you're getting a very expensive, very thorough, very data-intensive study that will be able to suggest a variety of transportation improvements that can be paid for in the regulatory system the state has established for impact fees, and then a recommendation on what those fees should be. And most likely they'll be quite different for a single-family home as compared to a commercial or industrial trip per whatever the land use is.
Thank you very much. Commissioners? Questions, comments, discussion? All right. So we are not hearing anything else. Was that what you needed from us, Mr. Gonzalez? Terrific. All right. Thank you, everybody, for your patience as we dealt with some of the technical challenges which arose this evening. With no further questions or comments, I would like to adjourn today's commission meeting at 8:21. Thanks very much, everyone. Be safe.